the ocean hasn't changed since I was 16. I'm still chasing elusive dreams.
You're listening to Grace, Geltman, and Weld on the Hammer Factor. Take it away, boys.
All right, welcome to Hammer Factor episode 52, the world's toughest edition. It's been a month since we recorded here at the Hammer Factor, and
it's like a summer break.
On the horn today, we have Whitewater legend, co-owner of Immersion Research, John Weld. Also, we have policy director for the Outdoor Alliance, former North Fork champion. And before I get into this, guys, Badfish Sup is the official paddleboard of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, IR co-founder and Whitewater legend John Weld, and retired spandex-wearing Dennis everywhere. Badfish was born in Salida, Colorado, when two paddling friends started trying to figure out how to build boards you could surf on river waves. Today, Badfish makes boards for all types of paddling, whether you want to run and surf rivers, surf and paddle in the ocean, or like John Weld, just go for a mellow paddle in flat water, contemplating your path to achieving Earl. For the month of June, we are offering free shipping to Hammer Factor listeners on any inflatable board. Just use the code WELDSUPS, all caps. That's WELDSUPS, all caps, at checkout. Check out our 2018 lineup at www.badfishsup.com. Colorado Beatitude is attainable. You just need a Badfish board to get there. I've been waiting so long to read that one.
That was the best ad copy yet.
Did you write that copy?
No, I didn't. No, Mike Harvey, co-owner there at Badfish, wrote that copy, and I get to read that over and over for the next couple episodes. So
we have the most codependent, disturbing relationship with the state of Colorado. There would be many counselors who advise Colorado just to walk away from this.
We're like the abusive boyfriend, you know? Oh, man. So we got a good show lined up. Are you in Hood River yet, Weld? I saw some pictures of you living in a van or living in a trailer by the river. What's going on?
We sold our house on Friday, and now we're living in a camper trailer for the next 2 months.
just easing into gorge life one step at a time.
Yeah, this is where I expected my life to be at this point.
Waiting to take delivery on the new Sprinter van.
Right, I'm right on track. No, our rental property doesn't start till August 1st. We're kind of in a holding pattern right now. But we're behind IR and a camper trailer, so it's something else.
So you kind of sleep out there and you can go inside to use the bathroom and that kind of thing?
Yeah, you're getting the picture.
Oh, so cool. Well, OutdoorAlliance.net. Is that right, Lewis? Is that the right URL?
.org.
OutdoorAlliance.org. I'll edit that out. Don't worry.
Where are we going with this?
Hang on. OutdoorAlliance.org. Get on the email list. I've got some good emails, but we're not going to cover those emails because you should be on the list to get those. But we have a couple topics to throw over to you here, Lewis. Let's start with which one of these do you want to start with?
I don't know. These are all kind of quick hits. What's the NPR one?
The NPR one is about there's basically already probing to do some mining in the National Monument that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's mining operations that are, immediately have their sights set on the reduced boundaries of what was formerly Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. And I mean, these are the threats that we were concerned about coming to fruition when this whole conversation about reducing monument boundaries started. And sure enough, the extractive industry folks have their they're ready to jump. So I
noticed it was a Canadian mining firm that's looking at it, which I thought was an interesting twist.
It's all these like international mining companies all the time. It seems like they're all these, I don't know. It's like, it seems like every time you hear about some mining threat, it's like a Canadian company or a Chilean company or, not to, I don't know why that is. It just seems like it's often the case, but, I'm sure that there will be legal challenges and efforts to halt that, at least pending the litigation on the legality of the monument reductions. So we'll see what happens there. I think that something that's kind of a challenge with hard rock mining is it's all governed by this 1872 mining law, and once they have a legitimate mining claim, it becomes basically like property right. And so, even if a new administration were to come and restore the previous boundaries, if the reductions in the meantime are found to be legal, then that would become like a compensatory taking, and they would have to basically pay the mining company to leave. So, I mean, it just creates a big, thorny nest of problems when you start tampering with these protections that were really intended to be permanent. So it's, we'll see how things play out there.
So even though this is still in court, you can go ahead and put your stake in the ground?
It's unclear to me, to be honest. I mean, I think that, that would certainly be the claim of this administration. They would say that, what we did is legal and binding, and now it's open for business. I think that there are, other groups that, obviously we feel that those reductions are not legal, and, it's going to be to the courts to determine what the outcome of that is. But what the sort of default setting in the meantime is, dependent on the court. Basically, it's like if they wanted to kind of enjoin this activity pending the determination of the legality of the reductions, they could do that, but it would take a court to do it.
So this next article kind of goes in line with what you were saying about Zinke wanting to come back to Montana at some point, be governor and whatnot. You said this was part of a bigger piece. Now, I didn't see that article, but this basically talks about how Halliburton is investing in a Ryan Zinke project in Whitefish. Am I correct there?
It was a little complicated for me as well, but there was a long Politico piece that came out 2 or 3 days ago, sort of detailing this relationship between some of the higher ups at Halliburton and this nonprofit that Zinke started in Whitefish, where he has this, this piece of property that belongs to this nonprofit that he started, that they're allegedly going to turn into some sort of park, but nothing has happened. And in the meantime, there are a bunch of investors who are trying to create some kind of like commercial development next to the park, and there's some sort of agreement in principle that they're going to be able to use part of the park as a parking area, and Zinke's going to have some kind of preference to open some brewery in this commercial development. And these folks from Halliburton are all tied up in this effort, and it's the specifics of it are sort of less important to me than, just sort of confirming what we already know, which is that, these guys, Ryan Zinke, he's in bed with the fossil fuel industry. And, I guess, the saying you hear all the time is it's, what's really shocking is not what goes on. It's, all the illegal stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C. It's everything that goes on that's legal. And maybe this is legal, maybe it's not. It seems like it's a little shady to me, but regardless, it's I think it's just confirming what we already know about this guy, which is that his people who he's looking out for, who he's allied with, it's not us, it's the fossil fuel industry. So, I was just thinking about it, and, you look back at Obama's last Secretary of Interior, Sally Jewell. She came from, she was the CEO of REI when she left to become the Secretary of Interior. Now she's back doing, a lot of conservation work. I saw her at Outdoor Retailer last year. I mean, she's, still involved in protecting public lands in some capacity. Obama's Secretary of Interior before that was Ken Salazar. I'm not sure what he's up to right now, but the last time I saw him, it was at a Political Action Committee event raising money for conservation-focused political candidates. George W. Bush's last Secretary of the Interior left and immediately went to go work for Royal Dutch Shell. So it's that's when you have a Republican administration, that's their orientation as far as public lands. It's like extractive industry. That's who those folks are allied with, and it's kind of what you get.
Well, I don't really know what to say about that. I kind of am just not surprised by any of that. So, I mean, it's just everything that we've been talking about, and now it's come to fruition. It's funny, we've been talking about this now for over a year, and so you can look back at our conversations and be like, well, I bet this is going to happen as soon as that goes down, or as soon as those protections are lifted, and sure enough, it's coming to fruition. I don't know. What about some good news, Lewis?
Good news. There's a big public lands protection bill for Emery County, Utah, that's actually been introduced by John Curtis, who replaced Jason Chaffetz in the House, and believe it or not, Orrin Hatch. And it's sort of this bill's got a hearing today. It's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I think that some of the conservation groups are not thrilled with it because it does leave a lot of worthy places unprotected, but it, protects a lot of new wilderness, new national conservation areas, some new wild and scenic rivers on I want to say the Green. It
like Green Yampa, that zone, or?
Yeah, exactly. And we're working with them to try and create some management principles in there to make sure that this all happens in a way that's sensitive of a bunch of really important climbing resources down there, and also that the wilderness boundaries are drawn in a way that protects existing and protected prospective mountain biking opportunities. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, it's not something that we're 100% on board with just yet, but it's like positive development. It's good to see folks from Utah getting on board with some conservation proposals, even if it's not everything that it's not the bill we would write necessarily, but it seems like it has the potential to do some positive things. So that's cool.
So if it comes out of committee, then does it get put up for what happens after that?
So this is just a hearing, so they'll just kind of talk about the bill and have witnesses speaking about it. And then the next thing after that would be a committee markup where they would potentially make amendments and actually vote on the bill out of committee, and then it would move to the floor.
Okay, so it's seriously being talked about right now.
Yeah, it's still relatively early in the process, but it's got a hearing today, so that's hopefully positive.
OutdoorAlliance.org. Get on the email list. You'll get some emails from Lewis.
Yeah, we also had a cool, at the North Fork last week, there was a cool event on Tuesday night, sort of like North Fork Week's getting a little longer every year, but it was a kind of a symposium about river protection at Payette Brewing in Boise, which was a pretty cool event. And it was cool for me to hear there were a bunch of folks from American Whitewater and Idaho Rivers United and Idaho Conservation League talking about this big proposed gold mine in the headwaters of the South Salmon, which is, again, I guess we're pivoting back to bad news, but the event was really cool. And it was really cool to learn more about this gold mine threat in the South Salmon. It sounds like the draft environmental impact statement is coming out this fall, so that'll be the next opportunity for folks to be engaged on that. But I'm sure we'll talk about that more in the fall. Lesser spoke a bit about just talking about the early days of kind of Idaho River conservation and protecting the North Fork, which was in the crosshairs of hydropower developers. And it was just cool to hear the sort of early stories of river conservation out there. So that was a cool event.
All right, what else we got on the list? We got a law firm defends kayakers on the Potomac.
Do you know about these cats?
Yeah, that's Adam Van Grack.
Yeah. What's I don't know how we got this piece. Do you know anything about this?
I didn't see the story.
Basically, the question posed is, can the Park Service order a paddler off the flooded Potomac?
It looks like this guy runs a blog. This law firm runs a blog, and this is one of their blog posts is talking about the question Grace just mentioned, and refers back to the incident with Billy Hearn, Eric Martin, and myself and Davey subsequently.
Yeah, and look at that. There's a picture of Andrew McEwen on the blog post.
Yeah, Andrew McEwen, who will be on the Hammer Factor in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the background behind this story, behind this article, is that years ago, it must have been mid '90s, right? The Potomac flooded to some ridiculous level, and Billy Hearn and Eric Martin. Billy Hearn was, brother with Davy Hearn and ran Viking Paddles among other things, and Eric Martin has W. Wilderness Voyagers here in Ohio Power Rafting Company. But we put on the Potomac to go surf the wave at Little Falls, which is, a big low-head dam that's been filled in, but at really high water, it makes this glassy wave that's big enough to accommodate a slalom boat tip to tail. And the wave is, I don't know, how long would you say the wave is? A quarter mile long? Something like that?
You mean wide?
Yeah, quarter mile wide. It goes on forever. And you surf back and forth in this thing. And so the river was high enough that they had closed down the parkway right next to the river there by the wave. And we were out surfing, and these cop cars had started pulling up along the bank and kind of gathering. They were watching us, and finally one of them gets on a on a bullhorn and starts ordering us off the wave. And we're several hundred yards from the bank, and we're looking at each other like, no, I don't think we're going to do that. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I'm not doing what the police are telling me to do. But at the same time, I'm like, what are they going to do? Right. Earlier that day, we had told Davy Hearn we were going to go out and go surfing there. And so he wasn't ready to go at the time, but he was getting ready. So while this is going on, Davy's upstream putting on at Little Falls Creek and coming out of the water, And so meanwhile, the cops are getting more and more agitated with us, and they're starting to scream. And then
I can just picture you guys like paddle twirling and like woohoo and like cross.
Well, now we're just surfing in this wave next to each other. This goes on for like 10 minutes, and now the police are like, "Get off the wave! Report to the bank immediately!" And now there's a helicopter above our head, and the helicopter has a bullhorn yelling basically the same thing. And we're kind of having a little confab out there on the wave, figuring out what we're going to do. And so after a bit, we decide we're going to peel out and we're going to go hide in one of the islands downstream, right? So we peel out, and that's what we do. We actually go and hide, and the helicopter has to go refuel or something, and we climb up into an island and bury ourselves in leaves and cover our boats up so the helicopter can't. It's like November, so there's no leaves in the trees. So meanwhile, Davy Hearn had floated down and started surfing the wave, and now the cops are like a beehive. They are very agitated, right? And Davey, who is, Mr. Upright Citizens out there in the wave, they're like, "Get in here immediately!" And he surfs over. They proceed to drag him out of the boat and like basically get him in a neck hold. And there's video of this. And I don't know if they're hitting him with a billy club, but it's forcibly removing him from the boat. And they're like dragging him up the bank like 6 cops. And Davey's like, "What the hell's going on?" And then they threw in a cop car. They charged me to go to court. Meanwhile, Eric and Billy and I are hiding in this island, and the helicopter's looking for us for like an hour, circling back and forth. And finally it disappears, and we make a sprint for the bank. It involves some more running from the cops. But the question this law firm is asking is whether, the Park Service was able to, legally able to do that.
Well, I thought
I don't know that.
I thought what was interesting that the river is controlled by Maryland, and when they pulled Davy, right? No, Billy.
Yeah.
Davy Hearn.
Davy.
Yeah.
Davy.
When they pulled Davy out, they had the authority to, because he was trespassing on closed property, but all the charges were dropped because they lured him on to the closed property before they beat him up. So it was all a wash. The law.
There was like it's the park police and then the National Forest Service. There was like 2 different conflicting.
I think the issue was also that they had the authority to close the land, but not the river. And Davy had put in on Cabin John Creek and paddled in instead of putting in on Park Service land. Yeah. So he got off the hook. Yeah. But it was like, I believe it was on the front page of the Washington Post.
Sure was. It was
it was like Olympian dragged from river or something like that. I mean, it was like.
Oh, I remember that.
It was quite a deal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. We got another topic of discussion here. This is kind of about race organizing. I believe this started with you ranting a little bit about Calhoun, getting onto you about some stuff at some events, Weld.
Yeah, Calhoun okay, Calhoun, to his credit, not only is a very passionate racer and takes his stuff very seriously, which you have to appreciate, but also following the podcast, he did write me and say, he was like, yeah, I think you have a point. But if you recall, the thing was, Calhoun has sort of been calling race organizers and really trying to micromanage the organization of the races as it pertains to boat classes and stuff like that. And a lot of these race organizers, and we actually got a letter from a race organizer that basically agreed with us, but these guys are strung out, man. It's a thankless job putting together a race. And then, you rarely get a thanks, but you always get complainers, people coming up and saying something, the timing was wrong or the shirts were bad or you name it, there's some bitch about it. But Calhoun did write back. Calhoun seemed to imply that he was interested in pursuing this idea of making a third-party race standard website or some online tool where there could be a standard that race organizers could use to take that question out of people's organizers' things to worry about, because I think that would be very much appreciated. But that was the long and short of that.
Yeah. I like this email comes in and it's got basically 3 points, and this is a fellow race organizer, and I'll read these off. Number 1, if the words "you should" appear in your statement, just keep it to yourself. Number 2, be the change you want to see if you're willing to make a contribution. If you aren't willing to make a contribution, then why should anyone do it for you? Number 3, contact the organizers after the event is over. And to me, that's the key one as an event organizer is everything can be worked out, but just because the race is over, there's a lot more going on. So
I think it was Alex Barham that wrote that.
That was
email.
Alex? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Alex. But, I see both sides of it. When you're wound up, you're racing, you put in some time, it's all on the line, something happens, you feel cheated.
But I don't think we should throw Jeff I don't think that was what Jeff was doing there. I think Jeff was trying to be helpful.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Jeff's trying to be helpful for sure, but I think the whole issue's been settled. I don't think there's anything.
Should we get in? We have a ton of listener mail, so we got to just bang through a few of these. Do you want to jump in? Do we want to do some 5 questions in 30 seconds?
We do have 5 questions in 30 seconds. We managed to put one of those together this show.
So I answered. John, you've answered.
Yeah, Geltman, you're up.
Geltman, you're up.
All right, you ready? I'll ask. Geltman, and you answer. And for those of you who are new to this segment, it's 5 questions. Geltman has 30 seconds to answer them, although it rarely takes just 30 seconds. 4 of these questions came from our serial questioner, Fernando Ayuso.
I think
he's from Spain.
That's the way I would say it, yeah.
Yeah, when he writes, he goes big.
He's a binge writer.
He's a binge writer. Thank you.
Let me know when you're ready, because I'll hit start on my stopwatch here.
Geltman, you ready?
Ready.
Okay, this one's from Fernando. Is sweet the best helmet?
As far as I know.
Second one's from Fernando. Full face or not full face?
Not full face.
Number 3, Fernando. What is the ratio of pro kayakers coming from wealthy families?
I don't know, but it helps.
We need a ratio. Take your best guess. 1 wealthy to every 5 regular, 2 wealthy to every 3.
What's wealthy?
Parents giving them money to. They don't have to.
Your parents will make sure that you never have to work ever again.
Right. Not that much, but there are parents who are wealthy enough to entertain your idea of sort of not doing anything but paddling for 5 to 6 years outside of high school and or college.
I think in a lot of ways, if you didn't come from wealthy parents, it wouldn't really change the odds there. But it's certainly a nice, if you're gonna. Yeah, I don't know, dude. I don't know. I have no idea.
Pass. All right, number 4 from Fernando. Is counting the number of rivers that you have run, is that a thing that people do, or just him and his weird friends?
I know people who do that. I do not do that.
All right. Last one comes from Kirk Edelman down there in the new car top tents. Is this consumption at its very worst, or an idea that has some legs?
No car top tents.
Okay. Boom.
Minute and 4 seconds. Not bad.
These were easy questions.
That's the closest we've come to actually hitting 30 seconds.
They're not easy. What do you mean easy? You couldn't answer one of them.
Well, that's complicated because it's like, here's the thing. Anybody can be a dirtbag. It's not hard. But it's a lot easier to be a dirtbag when you know that if you suddenly find yourself without health insurance and something cataclysmic happens that your parents are going to help you. It's like just living on somebody's couch and having no money. Like anybody can do that, but doing that with a margin of safety requires wealthy parents. And so I don't know how people are balancing that.
Okay, how about this? Of the age 21 to 25, no, let's say 18 to 25, what is the ratio of paddlers whose parents are buying their gear for them?
Or let's just say subsidizing their lifestyle to some extent.
50-50.
1 out of 2. Okay, there you go.
That's what we want to know. Is that so hard? Aiden, my kid, and I had a very in-depth discussion about dirtbag royalty a few weeks ago. And he was asking what dirtbag royalty was, and I was kind of put on the spot, but I think I came up with a reasonable answer. Because there's a difference between being a dirtbag and being dirtbag royalty.
Yeah, lay it on me.
I think dirtbag royalty is when you're, and the thing that people that came to mind would be like if you're living the dirtbag life, but you're also achieving really huge goals, like you're doing the big whitewater runs, multi-day, multi-trips down the Stikine, multiple trips down the Stikine in a day. You're writing articles, you're publishing stuff, you're part of the community, but you're hanging out there and really involved with the sport. That's dirtbag royalty. As opposed to just a dirtbag who's just kind of, not a mooch, but just existing.
So were you guys like contemplating the positives and negatives of each category, or?
Well, to be honest, he seems to idolize dirtbag royalty, so I was trying to put a positive spin on it.
Moving on. Where did the hate mail from Doc Rocco come from? Who wrote that?
That's a good question.
That. So this mail comes at us, and basically Doc Rocco came on the show, talked about Lyme's disease, pretty much said if chronic Lyme's disease was not a thing, all you got to do is get around to doxycycline and you're fine. Quit whining. And this...
Well, that was what Weld wanted him to say, and that was not what Doc Rocco said.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right.
And I actually showed Doc Rocco this. So this guy wrote in, and he expressed exactly what I thought we would have people express about Doc Rocco, was that there's a sort of medical establishment who's not recognized as a serious problem and that affects a lot of people, and Doc Rocco needs to get off his high horse, and the Infectious Disease Society of America is full of shit, blah, blah, blah. And I showed Doc Rocco this, and he seemed not only unfazed by it, but seemed very familiar with this. And he reiterated to me in a different way I think the point he was trying to make on the podcast was that the people who claim to have chronic Lyme's disease is a gigantic group of people who are not linked by any single group of symptoms. There are people that have anything from fatigue to arthritic type symptoms to headaches to brain cloud to, debilitating illness. There's no connection to any of these. And he's like, as a scientist, I do science. There has to be peer-reviewed science here from the gigantic morass of chronic Lyme sufferers, because there's so many. The science just isn't there. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. So that's just the bottom line.
Email was very passionate. Had some good points in there,
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not a doctor with it, but
I debated we should have Doc Rocco on, but at the same time, do we really need to feed this? I think that's not our show.
Moving on here. This is directed at you, Weld. This comes from Rob Taylor. Rob says, dang, Weld just went there. There are a lot of Jehovah Witnesses that become paddlers, or became paddlers. I think of a lot of us ended up on the river by being overwhelmed kids. While you were deciding on your next bikes, we were approaching strangers about things we couldn't possibly understand. We had to find the river out of necessity. You don't know us. Check yourself.
Yeah, so it took me a second to kind of catch on to what this was all about. I remember when Snowy came on and they were talking about him being
I remember.
And I went ahead and said, he's like a Jehovah's Witness. Right? So, yeah, here's the thing, right? Rob Taylor sits here and he's laughing. We're making fun of SUPers. He's laughing. We're making fun of close grippers. He's laughing when we're making fun of the low offsetters. And all of a sudden, we start making fun of his crowd. And then he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, Everyone knows it's the hammer factor. And you could say it's apples and oranges, but I'm telling you, when you decide that a 0-degree offset makes sense in defiance of any science, that's the same leap of faith as any religion, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, Nathan Woodward writes in with some good links. I mean, what do you think about that, Lewis? Lewis, Gelman, we got to get you in on this because, like, you're getting ready.
You seem to be dissatisfied with
West Virginia is getting ready to meet Hood River here. How is this union going to happen?
I'm going to stay out of this.
Oh, my
Really?
God.
That's it? Come on, counselor, let's do this.
We're going to do a whole Lewis uncut here because...
As soon as we get off the air, Lewis is going to have plenty to say about this, unfortunately.
Exactly. Well, please the fifth. All right. Pack Rafters, a good one from Nathan Woodward about Pack Rafters. Not much to say there. Some cool video links. I'll put those in the show notes. Oh, here we go. This is another one to you, Weld. In episode 50, this comes from Nelson. Josh Nelson? Is that Josh?
No, Nelson Oldham.
Nelson Oldham. Nelson says... Trivia.
No. All right.
I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. You guys just take it over.
Nelson are flashing like gang signs right now in the Skype call.
In episode 50, during Weld's rant about plastic boat weight, he mentioned he has only broken one boat in his life. What make and model was that boat? Bonus, on which rapid did the incident take place?
I had to think about this one too. No one's going to know this. I broke it on this would be, if you know the flood channel, that little channel in the Great Falls.
On the left, river left?
Yeah. It's like, I'm talking about Galvin. I had the first descent on that, and I broke my Hydra Mustang. The bottom drop. It blew the thing right in half. Literally broke my boat in half, and it broke my paddle. I still rolled up, though.
That's a solid first descent, man. It's a little gnarly section.
That was a little gnarly. Yeah, it was less than optimal, too.
Those guys... The DC boys are calling that the action channel now because it, like they call 5 feet on the Potomac gauge. Like if you look at the USGS gauge, it says action level is 5 feet, and that's the level you want for the action channel.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Moving on here, let's stay with the Weld theme while we're at it.
Nelson was there, by the way, that day, and I think he decided to portage after my misadventure out there, but
didn't sell it.
Oh, he was trying to catch you on one there, Weld. Here's another one directed at Weld. Here's the first part of my question. When you examine ROI on sponsoring kayakers with free gear, is it worth it or is it unquantifiable? Second part, are pro forms good or bad for increasing sales?
All right, this came from Tim Kennedy, our boat review guy. Not the anonymous boat review guy, but the completely...
I thought Lewis was the anonymous boat review guy.
But we're going to get to that.
Okay, we'll get to that.
And you've blown his identity. This is a good question, man. I'll tell you, sponsoring athletes, I've been doing this for 20 years or 20 plus years now. I have no idea if sponsoring athletes makes any sense or not. I just don't know. I don't. I every day I vacillate, whatever. My mind changes on that subject. And NRS right now is on a tear sponsoring athletes, and I'm always wondering if they're doing the right thing or not. So I don't know. The second part, the pro forms question, very, very good question for those people in the industry. And this is something, if you're in the industry, you should be thinking about this too, because pro forms, if you don't know, and everybody's listening to this podcast, I'm sure knows this, is that if you have some kind of in the industry, and particularly the outdoor industry, you can apply for a pro form, which means you get gear at half price or some big reduction off of retail, right? So you have Patagonia and companies like Patagonia and Prana, among others, who publish a print pro deal catalog and mail these things out on a monthly basis, right? That's how serious they're taking pro deals, right? And so the pro deal, for your manufacturer, you're thinking pro deal customers pay about the same thing as most retailers do, except you get paid at net zero because it's with a credit card. And the terms of shipping are much better, and terms of return are much better than you do with a retailer. So there's a lot of outdoor manufacturers who have latched onto this thing and recognize it as a serious, serious piece of income. And, of course, who pays the price for this is, of course, retailers. And it is part of a transition where basically, the idea of a middleman like a retailer is getting squashed. It's something that, as an industry, we have no answer to, and no one's really thinking. I mean, I'm sure we're thinking of the consequences, but no one's really doing anything about it. I don't know what's going to come of this, but it's a thing for sure. Yeah, you could say manufacturers will say, "Oh, we're doing it. This is a form of advertising, promoting our brand," but that's a lie. They're doing it because it's quick, easy money.
There you go. See that answer, Lewis? Boom, definitive. Just think about that. This comes at us from Anonymous. This is a good one here. This is a really good one. And man, we could do a whole show on this. Lewis, we should do a whole show on this sometime. You should lead this show up because this would be super interesting. Greetings, big thanks to the boys, blah, blah, blah. Loves Lewis's segment. He brings up a question: why the hunting and fishing and kayak communities do not work together more productively and more often and move visibly to make such areas more accessible to both. The gated.
Well, to be clear, he's talking about timber companies and gated properties around Portland in this particular case.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, there's locked roads, access, and whatnot. And he's saying, why don't the hunting and fishing crowd and the kayak communities get together more often to increase access to these areas? It's good for both of them. I think it's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's two questions here, right? There's one is working together more closely with the hunting and angling community. And that is something that we do quite a bit of at Outdoor Alliance. We actually sort of modeled ourselves in a way off of the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, which is a coalition of the national organizations like the sport or the species-specific conservation groups. So like the National Turkey Federation or whatever, like all of these different sort of niche hunting groups, and they work together on conservation issues. And we work pretty closely with backcountry hunters and anglers as well. Those two groups, they both do a ton of good work. I think that we speak to sort of culturally distinct communities. So I think that we don't necessarily do as much public facing work together, but we do communicate with them a lot and, try to support each other's efforts where we can. Those folks especially are able to make inroads with conservative lawmakers in a way that the traditional conservation groups have a hard time with, just because, I think that hunting and fishing have, that those traditions or whatever you want to call them, that just has more resonance with lawmakers representing rural areas or whatever. And those guys do a ton of good work. So we do work together. As far as the timber company access stuff, the guy who wrote in is talking a lot, out here in the Northwest, there are huge swaths of lands that are owned by the big timber companies like Weyerhaeuser and SDS, the big one out here in the Gorge. I guess personally, I don't work as much on the local access issues, but I think that idea of working together more closely with the hunting and fishing groups on access issues makes a ton of sense. And
so when I move out there and a bunch of this land's owned by SDS, I'm going to hike up a creek or something, it's all owned by SDS. Is that someplace I just can't go, or can I sneak on there and no one's going to know about it, or how does that work out?
I have not, like here in the Gorge, I haven't seen any access issues at all. There's for sure a law in Washington. I think there's one in Oregon as well that indemnifies private landholders if they open up their property for recreation access. So basically, the timber companies, they don't incur any liability for letting people go recreate on their land. Like the access point for the Green Truss is on SDS land. There are some bike trails around here that are also on private land, and sometimes some of them get closed kind of in the height of fire season because they're worried about people going in there and potentially starting a fire. In other places in the Northwest, access is more of a problem. Hancock Lumber owns a bunch of the access to Ernie's up on the North Fork Snoqual on the outside bend, and dealing with those guys has been a constant headache. They gate the road, they try and charge people for drive-in access, they try and charge people for walk-in access. And I know down south of Portland there are other places that experience those same kinds of problems, and I think that working together with the hunting and fishing community to try and open up access to some of those places is a really good idea.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mutual things that can go on between those two groups. And you're right. I mean, it's a totally broad spectrum of people in power that they can speak to.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on here, we've got some great emails coming in about the Strategic Outburst Reserve. We've got some people who are buying Outbursts. They love them. They're giving them good, positive reviews. We've got Stephen Formosa wants to do an interview, wants you guys to interview me sometime. That's a good email. But we're running. We got some first ascents in the Southeast with Ryan McAvoy. But we don't have time to get to all these. But there are two things on here I really would like to talk about. So one of them is Sol Waterman leaves U.S. production because of the tariffs. And the tariffs in Europe, this one's directed at Weld about how that's affecting your business. Are you guys fine getting into those after we interview Andrew and Aniel?
Let's do that. I was thinking about that question this morning too, and we really should follow through on getting someone on from Outdoor Industry Association to talk about the trade stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you how it's affecting us, or how it's affecting our side of the industry.
Yeah, and I've talked to a few other people within the industry, and it's pretty interesting. Are you guys up for talking about that? I think we should talk about that, but right now we got to get into Andrew and Aniel, or we're going to lose them.
Yeah, let's call Andrew. Man, we're pretty close to on time.
Yeah, we're doing good.
This is where we blow it right here.
Yeah, here we go. Next hour, we're going to be talking about Valley Mill.
Right.
You guys are going to
be
beating yourselves.
Bright orange plastic kayaks that reek of urine. The foam walls knocked flat.
This is the Hammer Factor. Is Andrew McEwen there?
One moment.
Nice one, Grace.
Whose number are we calling? Are we calling him at work?
Hello, this is Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew. This is John Grace from the Hammer Factor. You're on with Lewis Geltman and John Weld.
Excellent. Hey, how's it going?
What's up?
Good. I want to start off by saying thanks for coming on the show, and a big Valley Mill.
Well, yeah.
So real quick, Andrew, before we get into here, I want to introduce you as a under the radar style Jedi, Valley Mill cult member, and I don't know, Wildwater national champion many times over. Is there anything I missed there that you'd like to add?
No, that's nice. That's very flattering.
So you're doing this wrong, Grace, because if you want to get Andrew to talk about anything, you can't just ask him to chime in about anything that's going to make him, portray him in a positive light. You have to drag those details out of him.
Okay. Well, you guys jump in here and drag. Feel free. Where are you at right now, Andrew?
I'm at work.
I love it. Where do you work?
I work at an engineering firm in D.C.
Okay.
So it's like an office job, which has been pretty critical in my recovery over the past week. It's been so nice to just sit on my chair in the AC and work at the computer.
Well, one of the prime reason we brought you on this show is that you just recently won the Texas Water Safari on the San Marcos River in Texas. It's a 260-mile race. You won the solo division with a time of 47 minutes and 9 seconds. They have grouped
47 hours
only.
47 hours. Huge mess up there. 47 hours and 9 minutes. 5th overall with the teams and the group boats. What is the Texas Water Safari, and why did you do this?
Yeah, so it is a race from the source of the San Marcos on a little lake at the source of the San Marcos, and it starts on this tiny little river, and it follows the whole San Marcos into the Guadalupe River, and then goes all the way to the coast from there. So it's 260-some miles, kind of depending on how lost you get in the log jams. And it's been going on since the 1960s, so it has a lot of interesting history to it. And it's not really much of a whitewater race, but it's a downriver race. for the most part, except for the last few miles, which are across the bay. And the reason I did it is, I guess there are a lot of reasons, but it's kind of been on my mind for a long time. I had a friend who did it back in the day and did really well, and actually set the course record, a guy named Carter Johnson. And then came back the next year and tried to do it in a 2-person boat, and I think they destroyed the boat in the first day and had to pull out. So I felt like that range of experience was kind of appealing. The whole idea of going from source to sea is always a pretty appealing thing too.
But this is a notoriously awful race. I mean, if you know anything about this race, you know that it's just awful. I mean, that's obviously the attraction to a lot of people, that it's about as bad as it gets. I mean, it's hot. You have to bring snake bite kits. You're going to get probably attacked by an alligator at some point. It just goes. The problems go on and on and on, right?
Yeah, that's true. I kind of don't. I don't really think of it like that, though. I don't. I'm not really such a masochist that I do it for that. I kind of. It's just intriguing to me. Both because it's a source to sea thing, and also just the uncertainty. I'd never done anything like this, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And when I would try to sort of visualize a race like this, I was trying to compare it to other things I've done, and sometimes at the end of visualizing, I would be done in 40 hours and win the race, and other times I would end up losing a leg to an alligator or something like that. So it was totally it had that appeal of just complete uncertainty.
So are you allowed to do you just race one boat, or can you switch boats mid race?
You cannot switch boats. The only thing that you can get is food and water from your team captain. My team captain was my sister Ashley, who came out, and she can meet you kind of anywhere on the course. She has to be at certain checkpoints. There are about 10 checkpoints down the river that you have to make, cutoff time at each one. And so that's the only thing you get. You can't get a boat or any repair material or anything. You have to bring anything you think you'll need on the boat.
So what's the boat of choice?
So I raced a 21-foot racing sea kayak, which I thought worked pretty well. Mm-hmm. It has a kick-up rudder, and it's fast, and it maneuvers as much as you need it to maneuver, and it's really good in the bay at the end. Unfortunately, that was only a little fraction of the race. So that's what I raced, but it's really pretty interesting when you go down there because they have all of these Texas evolved boats, and the coolest ones are these 6-man sort of canoe type things that are 40 feet long and made out of carbon, and just kind of unlike anything you ever see, and have these huge rudders in the back because the river is a pretty tight little river to get a 40-foot boat down. Yeah.
I'm just trying to picture that. Sorry, Will.
No, you're paddling for 47 hours. Is that straight, or do you stop and rest? I mean, do you stop to take sleep for a bit, or what's the strategy there?
So I think I didn't, and people in front of me did not sleep at all. I think that if you're going much slower, you've got to stop and sleep. And I mean, in fact, I sort of found myself nodding off much of the second night.
But were you paddling while you were falling asleep? Did your arms keep moving? That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a little bizarre.
You can literally.
The second night, I was kind of hoping the second night would be short, but I was not fast enough, and I had to paddle, all the way through the second night.
Right?
Did you see the whole second night was just a dream. I was having. It was just not real, and nothing. I was seeing all these things. You're paddling, kind of. A really tight little river, and the trees hanging over, and all these trees were something else, and it was pretty bizarre. And a couple times, I would just wake up, and I thought I was done with this race, but here I am. My arms are still moving. It's not over.
You can literally paddle in your sleep. I love that.
Yeah.
So 260 miles in 47 hours is kind of slow. I mean, like I mean, you won the race, so obviously it's fast for the race, but that's 5 miles an hour. That seems kind of slow on moving water. Was there a lot of portaging? You talk about these trees. What were you faced with? Were you just in your boat floating the whole time? Or you having to get out a bunch? Or
the upper river has quite a few portages. You have to portage over around a couple of dams and a number of dams, and then there are definitely some logs that you have to portage over the course of the race, and then towards the end there's this sort of epic log jam that you have to navigate through, which was definitely challenging because I got there at night on the second night, and I was not with it enough to handle myself, and so I kind of paddled around in circles for a while down there. But I agree, you're right. It's not really that fast, and it was a pretty low water year, and I think that is definitely a factor. I mean, usually the times are much faster, but also, I mean, I guess just trying to paddle that far, you can't. Your intensity obviously suffers.
Yeah, goes to zero. This log jam you're talking about, is it like where the river's meeting a lake and there's a bunch of like wind-blown logs backed up, or give me just a visual. I'm trying to picture it.
Yeah, so it's down towards the end of the river, right near the end of the race, and it's kind of swampy down there, and the river's formed all these channels. And I don't even know where all those logs come from. Like, I didn't see that many trees in Texas, but they like all fall into the river and end up in this one spot somehow. And so, people have kind of figured out where to do it. I mean, I guess it changes from month to month, but when you go down there, you can kind of see where people have gotten out of their boats, and you can kind of figure it out. But it is pretty confusing, and there are definitely stories of people spending like 6 or 8 hours just kind of going in circles down there, which luckily didn't happen. But I did.
I mean, was it just luck that didn't happen to you, or did you? I mean, what was your?
I think
what was your strategy?
It helped that it was a low water year, and there weren't I think when it's high, all those channels open up, and you can just paddle forever. But I did start paddling. I sort of went down this channel, did a little portage, went down this channel, and got back to the river. And I put that in quotes because it's just like this. It's tiny, I couldn't even really tell that it was the river that I was paddling on. And I turned the wrong way because there's not really any current there. So I paddled all the way up to the bottom of the log jam, and then I sort of realized that, I actually didn't even realize then that I was on the river. I thought that I had just paddled in this huge circle from the portage I had done, and it was like this horror movie moment where I thought that, I was just like, I found like some passage to Hades, and I was going to have to paddle for eternity in the swamp. And, it wasn't like, that wouldn't have been like the weirdest thing that happened that night. Like, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility.
So what was the worst, like, what was the lowest point? Like, what was where was it, you're just, this is it. This is a terrible decision I made. Was there anything like that, or?
Yeah, definitely. On the first night, actually, there was like definitely a number of low points, but on the first night, it was, I bonked, I ran out of glycogen, and the problem was I just wasn't really eating, and I had sort of, parceled out a certain amount of food to eat, and I just like couldn't really get myself to do it, and so I ran out of glycogen, and I had to just like pull over and stop, and I was in third place at the time, and I was feeling really good about myself, and then that happened. I just had to stop, and kind of, if you've ever had that happen, you can't stay warm, and you can't you get out of breath, so it's just kind of like wheezing and shivering on the side of the river for a little while. And to give you an idea of like how low point that was, there was this like baseball sized rock like kind of like in my spine, and I kept thinking, like, this would be much better if I moved that rock, but I never did.
You're like, that's fine. That rock is fine. What about like blisters and all that kind of stuff? Were you all just, blistered up?
Yeah, to some extent. I wore gloves, which is kind of a weird thing for me, but that definitely helped. I put, Desitin, which I know John and John are probably familiar with, but it's, like baby diaper rash cream. I put that on my hands to keep them dry and just put them in gloves, and it actually worked fine. My hips got kind of shredded by the seat after a while. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I came out all right. Just, tired.
So would you do it again? And if you did it again, what would you do differently? Like, what would be the thing that you would do differently or things?
Yeah. I think I would, yeah. I was not thinking that I would when I was doing it, but now that I have a little distance, it was really cool. The river was cool. The community down there is like really cool. I thought, they put on just an awesome race. It's like really well organized, and people were very friendly. Like when I got to the finish line, one of the other racers like jumped in the water in his clothes and pulled my boat out because I was like, I don't know.
Well spent.
Obviously incapable of doing it. That's like not something that happens at most races I've been to.
Like at the end of the Arpaioc race, you're not paralyzed with fatigue.
Rumor has.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I guess in terms of what I do better, I think that I really would need to figure out the eating. I just wasn't savvy, on what to do. I had like Cliff Bars, and I just could not. Like I would just take a bite of Cliff Bar and kind of like chew it for 10 minutes, and it would just sort of like change shape, and it wouldn't digest at all.
Yeah. I'm doing a big bike race on Saturday, and it's like a 6 or 7 hour bike race, and eating is a huge issue because you get halfway through and you have to keep eating or you're going to bonk, but nothing is palatable.
Yeah.
So.
Well, rumor has it that Calhoun wants to go down there and go head to head with you.
Man, maybe we should team up in that case.
I'm just kidding.
But the thing about Calhoun, despite the general badassness, is that I just can't imagine him staying up that late.
So shots been fired over Calhoun's bow on that one. We'll see how that plays out.
Texas Water Safari. I had never heard of it. I guess Weld had heard of it and knew all about it. Lewis, had you heard of the Texas Water Safari before?
Just from Andrew.
Nelson, the guy who wrote that email me breaking my boat, he was big into the flat water scene for a while, and that was something he wanted to do, and he's trying to catch my ear about it, but it never panned out.
If you went back, would you take the same boat?
I think so. Yeah, it was really fun. It was just plenty fast.
Why not one of those epic waters, those wave ski things?
A surf
Too
ski?
tippy? Yeah, surf ski.
This boat basically was a surf ski. I mean, it's a lot like a surf ski with a deck. And I'm not really crazy about the way you just like sit in a puddle of water in a surf ski. I can't really picture doing that for 2 days.
Right.
But people did race surf skis, and I think that's definitely a good option.
Is this a big race? Are there like a ton of racers?
Yeah, it was big. There were 140-some boats that entered it, and most of those are team boats. Most of them are like open canoes. So I mean, that's like, yeah, it was pretty big.
Wow.
And I think only like, I don't know, 60% of people finish. There's a lot that can go wrong. 260 miles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, I was picturing like 25 guys out there. Like, yeah, that's a big event.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Texans, they don't mess around.
Well, Andrew, do you have anything else that you'd like to tell us about the Texas Water Safari, or anything you'd like our audience to know, or what you're up to, or anything like that?
I think that the only thing is that I think, there are people that sort of hear about this race and are just, aghast at the idea. And there are other people who hear it and are just like immediately intrigued. And, I think if you're one of those latter people, I would suggest, definitely like looking into it and asking people who have done it. There's a couple sort of forums on Facebook that are like really supportive, and go do it. It's definitely worth it.
I'm kind of interested, some kind of weird way. What length paddle and offset did you have?
I'm sorry?
What length paddle and what offset did you have?
Offset, yeah. It's a 208 and it's like 45-ish.
45.
All right, that's acceptable.
Okay.
That's good answer. That's fair enough.
Yeah, I thought I was in for it.
No, it's good. Pass.
What were the people like down there? Was it like, just like looking at all the pictures, it seemed like there was, some guys like you who were, kind of on a mission, and then also maybe a pretty good chunk of Texas good old boys kind of out on a lark.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. There are a lot of people who are not experienced racers at all, and like there are a lot of people who, like fish from their canoe and they hear about this and in good Texas fashion, they, just sign up for it and do it, or at least start it. But yeah, there's definitely like a real competitive contingent too, and most of them race the 6-man boats. There were 2 6-man boats that were just like blisteringly fast this year, and they were competing with each other. It's like kind of blows my mind that they were competing so intensely for such a long time. It sounds, so exhausting. But those guys finished about 13 hours before I did, or something like that.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, like they just, were on it the whole time, and especially considering it's a low water year, I think it seems like they went really fast. And it's cool, like they really, treat it very seriously. They're, both like the logistics of, getting the boat together and outfitting it and getting all the food and all that stuff is, it takes a lot of time, and also they've, clearly been training.
Wow.
And did those guys? I saw that the first 2 boats finished just like a couple minutes apart after 30-some hours. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I guess the first boat was ahead the whole time, and they had like a pretty good chunk of time, like maybe almost an hour going into the bay, and they have these, and it's like these boats are not like all that suitable for choppy water, and they have these like like a 40-foot long spray skirt that they like unroll and snap to the side of the boat.
Yeah, we make those, by the way.
So I think they, the first boat actually like flipped twice in the bay and had to, negotiate that, and knowing that other team was breathing down their neck. But they still, pulled in, I think, 5 minutes ahead.
Wow.
Wow. And do you think the team boats, do they like take turns and kind of like rest or sleep like on the boat and shifts, you think, or are they all just like up and pulling for the whole time?
Those fast boats are up and pulling the whole time. I've heard that, what's really impressive is, those guys are like pretty awesome, the guys who finished up front, but the guys who took like 95 hours or whatever is like pretty impressive too. And from what I understand is that sometimes those boats do that where, one person sleeps and the other person just steers it. On that river, it's a little bit, there are a lot of trees in that river, and I don't think that, that can be lightly done, especially at night.
How many times, like an hour, do you think you had to get out of your boat to deal with something?
At the beginning, it was like all the time, there's a dam every few miles, it seemed like. And then, really, on the second day, you can really go, I don't know, for 15 hours or whatever without getting out of your boat if you wanted to. It was nothing really on the Guadalupe to make you stop. Like I was sort of looking forward to this one set of rapids kind of all day, it was just like something to see. And I never even saw them. Like, I don't know. I guess I ran them, but.
So these guys who finished in like 95 hours, what's the time cutoff?
Well, so there are cutoffs at each, at each checkpoint, and I think they, that's what kicks a lot of people out of the race. They don't make a cutoff. But yeah, 100 hours overall is the cutoff, and there are definitely people who, I don't know. Certainly it happens that people make it to the last don't make it at the last checkpoint, and have to drive the rest of the way. But yeah, it is pretty cool to be on the river for that long and just keep at it.
Very cool. Well, congratulations, Andrew.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, seriously.
All right.
Well, I think that pretty much sums it up for the Texas Water Safari. I've just registered while we've been recording this show.
And Calhoun, suck it. I think that's the other thing we learned.
It's like the Kick Jeff Calhoun episode. Calhoun's a sensitive guy, man. You guys
He's very sensitive. Yeah, he's a delicate flower.
But this is the way you get him to do stuff. You sort of prod the bear a little bit with the
Exactly.
stick and then see what happens.
We love you, Jeff. Don't take us the wrong way.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Andrew, and we'll have to catch up with you later.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, dude.
Sure thing. Later.
95 hours.
Now, that's a race.
That's that's impressive. I'm just telling you. Should we just rapid fire right into our next toughest race?
Yeah.
Person
Let's do
here. We got Aniel Sarasolsis on the line here, North Fork champion for 2018. Let's get right into it. What is your paddle length and offset, Aniel?
What is my paddling offset?
Your paddle length, length of your paddle and the feather offset.
I use 200 centimeters and 45 for offset, always.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, yeah, that's acceptable.
That's all right. You're good.
We can move on.
We can
here.
keep going.
Aniel really needs no introduction. The last time you were on the Hammer.
That will do it for part 1 of Toughest Races with Andrew McEwen and Aniel Sarasolsis. Stay tuned for the rest of Aniel's interview, more viewer mail, and of course, rants and raves. As always, thank you for listening to The Hammer Factor.
But what can I say, yo? I guess you don't know.
Sometimes I feel like this world keeps people in the